When Jaws hit theaters, people learned to fear what lurked beneath the waves. But in Alaska, you don't need the ocean to feel that fear, because something alive, something far bigger than any shark, has been waiting in the lakes.
It's at least 1,200 feet, but nobody knows. Nobody's taken a rock tied to a string and dropped it down to the bottom.
For decades, witnesses have described the same terrifying thing, something beneath the water, strong enough to snap steel lines. Rock float planes, and send sonar screens into chaos. Locals have only one name for it: the Iliamna monster, a creature older than Alaska itself, whispered about in legends and police reports alike.
We didn't bother to go out there and try to see how big those big ones were because we were busy trying to stay alive in shallow water.
For years, scientists dismissed it as nothing more than a legend. But in 2017, the lake answered back, and no one was laughing anymore, because that was the year the lake finally gave up one of its secrets, and it changed everything we thought we knew about what lives beneath. Lake Iliamna stretches across southwest Alaska like an inland ocean, 1,000 square miles of dark. Freezing water where silence feels alive. You could drop the entire city of New York into it and still have room for Los Angeles. In some places, the lake plunges nearly 1,000 feet deeper than the Eiffel Tower is tall, and in others, weighted lines have vanished into darkness without ever touching bottom. There are no roads leading here, no easy escape. Only a vast expanse of cold that holds more water than 15 Loch Ness lakes combined. Scientists describe Iliamna as a lake of two worlds. Near the surface, salmon flash through ribbons of sunlight, while seals hunt in brief bursts of motion. But below the thermocline, the invisible barrier where warm and cold waters meet, lies a realm untouched by light, where pressure could crush steel and the temperature never changes. A perfect refuge for something that doesn't want to be found. What makes this lake even stranger is that it breathes with the ocean. Through the Kvichak River, saltwater creatures sometimes wander inland. Belugas have been seen surfacing, and seals have made the lake their permanent home. If marine life can adapt to these depths, then perhaps something else could too, something older, stronger, and far less willing to be seen. Pilots crossing the lake often report shadows moving beneath the surface, too long for salmon, too fast for seals. One veteran aviator has captured the same dark shape more than a dozen times, a creature longer than his plane's pontoons, gliding with a slow, deliberate rhythm that feels intelligent. To the Tlingit, it is Gona Cadet, half wolf, half orca. The Aleut call it Jig-ik-nuk, the one that hunts in packs. For centuries, it was a legend. But in September 1942, that legend looked up from the depths and looked back. In September 1942, a bush pilot named Bush Branson was flying mail and supplies across southwest Alaska, a route he knew better than most men knew their own homes. The war had turned the skies into highways of steel, but that morning was still and silent. Below him, Lake Iliamna shimmered like a sheet of polished glass. Then came the ripple, a single disturbance slicing across the calm. Too long to be a school of fish, too fast to be seals. It moved in sharp, deliberate bursts, a zigzag of power cutting through the water. Branson dipped his wings and descended, curiosity winning over caution. Through the clear surface, he saw it a vast, dark shape gliding just beneath his plane. It moved like a serpent, 40 feet long at least, with a vertical fin jagged as a saw blade and a tail that struck the water hard enough to rattle his cockpit. The head was broad, the body smooth and muscular, not a whale, not a fish, something in between. He followed it for nearly a mile before it dove, leaving behind a whirlpool the size of a house. When he landed, Branson filed his report with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, expecting disbelief. Instead, an officer named Donald Walker arrived to take his statement in person. The report was marked credible but unconfirmed, then quietly buried. 2 weeks later, another pilot reported the same thing, a massive, metallic-backed creature breaching near the same stretch of water. By 1950, more than a dozen pilots had described similar sightings. Trained men, used to reading the lake's every shadow. Whatever haunted those waters wasn't imagination or myth. It was real. And before long, it would stop hiding by the 1960s. Lake Iliamna's quiet beauty had taken on a darker edge. What had once been Alaska's fishing paradise was now a place people spoke of in lowered voices, where boats vanished without warning and nets came back in shreds. At first, it was easy to dismiss loose propellers, submerged logs, maybe a rogue sturgeon. But the stories kept spreading. Fishermen returned with dented hulls, claiming something had struck them from below. Others swore they'd seen vast shadows following their boat's shapes longer than any salmon run, moving with the slow, deliberate rhythm of a hunter. In the summer of 1963, that fear surfaced in full. A crew near Pedro Bay was hauling in their nets when the line locked tight. As if hooked to the bottom, they tried to pull free, but then the entire boat lurched. Whatever was down there wasn't snagged, it was pulling back. The men cut the line, but the resistance held, tugging hard enough to tilt the vessel before finally letting go. When they hauled up what was left, the ropes were shredded, not frayed, but sliced clean through. One man claimed he saw it. Just for a moment, something rolling beneath the water, dark and scaled, its tail crashing against the surface with a sound like thunder. Within weeks, more reports followed boats capsized, anchors twisted, divers refusing to descend past 60 feet after their sonar went haywire. The Alaska Department of Fish and Game released a short statement calling it unknown aquatic activity, but no one around the lake needed an explanation. They'd already given the thing a name, the Gonacadet. And that summer, for the first time in living memory, it stopped being a legend. It started hunting again. By the 1970s, Lake Iliamna had become the epicenter of one of North America's strangest mysteries: the sightings, the torn nets, the missing boats. All of it drew scientists, journalists, and even the military to Alaska's largest and most unforgiving lake. What began as curiosity soon turned into something far darker. In 1979, the Alaska Department of Fish and Game partnered with the U.S. Navy's Arctic Research Division on the first government-funded investigation of the phenomenon. Their objective was simple: determine whether an unknown species could explain the growing reports. For weeks, they dragged sonar arrays and underwater cameras across the black depths, finding nothing but silence. Then, on August 12th, the sonar lit up. A single object, nearly 50 feet long, moved 800 feet below the surface, gliding with a smooth, serpentine motion no known fish could produce, before the team could react. The cameras went dead, and one of their steel longlines snapped under extreme tension. The logbook recorded the moment in 5 words: violent contact with unknown object. The data was classified immediately, and when reporters later requested access, officials claimed the files had been lost in transit. As government interest faded, private researchers stepped in. In 1987, marine biologist Clark Donnelly led an independent expedition, convinced the creature was a colossal Pacific sleeper shark. He lowered baited cameras into the deep, but after 2 nights, the rig's cable snapped clean through. The recovered metal was deeply scored, as though bitten by something with teeth strong enough to shear steel. Donnelly sent the samples for analysis, but the lab advised him to abandon the study. He did, and was never heard from again. The last official glimpse came in 1990, when a PBS crew filming near Tom Cod Bay reportedly captured something surfacing massive, grayscaled, alive. Before the footage could air, it vanished from the archives. Officials blamed a clerical error. Locals still call it a cover-up. After that, the expeditions stopped. The lake was sealed off as a protected habitat, but those who live along its shores know the truth. This wasn't preservation, it was containment. Because whatever surfaced in Lake Iliamna was never supposed to be found for most of the 20th century. The mystery of Lake Iliamna lingered like background static in Alaskan folklore, a story traded between fishermen, pilots, and locals who claimed to have seen something moving beneath the ice. But in the early 2000s, that silence broke, and this time, the world was watching. In July 2002, 3 commercial fishermen near Knutsen Bay were filming their catch when the lake behind them began to ripple. The footage showed calm water then. Suddenly, a dark ridge rising from below, more than 30 feet long, rolling with deliberate motion before vanishing in a burst of bubbles. At first glance, it could have been seals. But when the biologist reviewing the tape paused the frame, he saw something different, a segmented ridge that looked like a spine, and a triangular fin cutting through the water like steel. The video was quietly dismissed, but leaked copies found their way online. Within weeks, the story exploded across Alaska. People called it the Iliamna Awakening. The reports only grew stranger. In 2009, veteran bush pilot Paul Henriksen was flying tourists over the lake when his aircraft jolted hard to one side. He assumed turbulence until he looked down. A massive shape had breached beneath him, striking the underside of his floatplane with its tail. When he landed, one pontoon was dented inward, as if something had hit it from below. Officials blamed floating debris. Henriksen, after 25 years flying over the same route, said debris didn't move like that. Then, in 2011 came the video that changed everything. A wildlife photographer testing a drone captured a colossal serpentine form gliding just beneath the surface, nearly 50 feet long, its scales flashing silver in the light. For a heartbeat, its head broke the water, revealing a wide, flat jaw lined with what looked like gills. 2 days later, the footage vanished. The photographer's online accounts were deleted. His cabin was found abandoned, lights still on. Dinner half-eaten. After that, even the skeptics stopped laughing. Whatever lived in Lake Iliamna was real. And in 2017, it would rise again with deadly consequences. By the summer of 2017, the legend of Lake Iliamna had become almost a joke in southwest Alaska, a story traded in bars, told to scare tourists, and whispered around campfires. Everyone knew about the monster, but no one really believed it. Until July 15th. That morning, a float plane carrying 4 people, 2 tourists from Oregon, their guide, and veteran pilot Rick Halverson lifted off from Pedro Bay under a cloudless sky. The flight should have lasted less than half an hour. 20 minutes later, fishermen saw the plane veer violently, then plunge straight into the water. There was no explosion, no smoke, only a burst of spray. And then silence. Rescue teams reached the site within hours. The wreckage was easy to locate, but what they pulled from the depths was anything but normal. The pontoons were crushed inward. One folded almost in half. The cockpit was gone, sheared clean away. Embedded in the metal were strands of fibrous gray tissue, laced with cartilage organic, but from no species anyone could identify. A week later, a single survivor was found along the northern shore. Mark Ellison of Portland was hypothermic, incoherent, and terrified. Before he died 2 days later, he muttered fragments of what he'd seen, something rising beneath the plane. An enormous shape with rows of teeth and a single eye staring from the deep. His body was never released to the public. The National Transportation Safety Board launched an investigation, but closed it almost immediately. The official report cited a collision with submerged debris. Locals never believed that. Divers later claimed to have seen circular impressions along the fuselage and a trench carved through the silt, a scar stretching nearly 200 feet into the dark. Soon after, the northern section of the lake was sealed off as a restricted ecological zone. No one has been allowed to dive there since, but pilots still see shadows beneath the surface. Sonar still detects movement. And every summer, when the salmon return, the lake grows silent, as if something vast is listening. After the 2017 crash, the monster of Lake Iliamna stopped being a story whispered in fishing villages and became something far more serious. Officials called it an environmental risk. Locals called it revenge. But beneath the official silence, one question lingered: what exactly was living in that lake? And why did those who saw it so often vanish? Some scientists insist the answer is biological. They believe the creature could be a massive Pacific sleeper shark, an ancient predator capable of surviving centuries in freezing water. Its metabolism so slow, it barely moves until it strikes. These giants can grow beyond 20 feet, and a few may have entered the lake through the Kvichak River long ago, adapting to its depths. But the reports from Iliamna describe something far larger, shapes over 50 feet long, attacking boats and aircraft with uncanny precision. To reach that size, it would have to be older than human civilization, and far more aware. Others whisper that the explanation lies in human hands. In the 1950s, the U.S. military conducted secret sonar tests in Alaska under a program known as Operation Coldwater. Declassified Navy notes from 1961 mention biomass displacement in the Iliamna sector. Continued monitoring recommended. No further records exist. And when a Navy expedition's sonar mysteriously failed in 1979, the project was abandoned overnight. Some now believe the lake wasn't being studied, it was being contained. But long before the military or the scientists. The Tlingit told of Gonakadet, a guardian spirit that once brought fish to the people, but turned violent when the balance of the land was broken. Elders still warn that when the lake turns red, it means the creature is feeding. In 2017, divers described crimson water near the crash site blood with no known origin. Maybe it isn't a monster at all. Maybe it's a warning guarding something in the depths that was never meant to be found. In the years after the 2017 crash, Lake Iliamna was quietly declared a restricted conservation zone, but pilots knew better. They reported unmarked black boats stationed over the same coordinates, and at night. A faint blue light rising from beneath the surface, pulsing like something alive. In 2019, a geological survey detected a vast cavern system beneath the southern basin, connected to the sea. When a probe was lowered, it transmitted only 4 seconds of footage, a tunnel lined with ribbed, organic structures, and for a moment, a single pale, lidless eye staring back. The data was seized, and the report classified within days. Then, in 2022, a tremor shook the lake. Witnesses saw a column of water erupt skyward, and the next morning, 4 massive shapes drifted beneath the surface before vanishing into the depths. Scientists now whisper that the Gonakadet was never a legend, but a lineage survivors of an ancient world that has been disturbed. Others believe it was never sleeping, only contained. Today, the lake remains closed, its waters silent but restless, and whatever lives beneath Iliamna is still waiting to rise.